The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's Brian from Breaking Down Security this week. As promised, as I mentioned last week in our news episode, there is a couple episodes coming up with Alyssa Miller and April Wright on IoT security and stalking. So we're going to go ahead and get right into that. The first part of the interview you might have heard a couple of weeks ago was us just riffing on open source sustainability, and I didn't mean for that to go that long. But we had a good discussion on just that, and I thought, well, it would make sense to split that up and not make the split up any weirder than it already was. So we riffed for about 25 minutes on open source sustainability, and then we started talking about what we originally asked Alyssa and April to be here for, which was IoT concepts and issues that rise from IoT security and being able to use certain devices in unintended methods. And a lot of parallels I hear from, using tools as they're not intended to be used for nefarious purposes. And then you come back to all of our open source, offensive security tools, tools being used for good, but also being used for evil. So just glad that April and Alyssa were able to join us and give us time. So I'm going to get you started here on part one of that discussion, and we'll have part two next week. Have a great week. Okay, so to shift gears, we one of the reasons we had this show and the reason we're having April and Alyssa on was inspired by some Twitter conversations back in, surprisingly, November of last year. That's just how long ago it was. But so this came out from a tweet from April. Somebody had put on TikTok. Person's name is Kayla. Found an AirTag on their car, and an AirTag, for those of you who aren't aware of what that is, it's a little device normally used to find things that are lost. If you've lost your keys, or I think April has used them on their luggage, or Miss Berlin used a cell phone once to track her packages, but they made it small enough. Now you could probably put it in a package to ship. This was actually found on a spot outside of her car. And as she was driving home, she has an iPhone apparently, and it had notified her that there's an AirTag following you or is traveling with you. And thankfully, Kayla, this had a happy ending. Kayla was able to not drive home and actually go to what I believe is a friend's house and sleep there for the night. And was, I think, she found the device on her car. There have been other stories since this story and this tweet about somebody who had noticed or had been told that AirTags were found in their vicinity, and they called the police. The police actually were looking for them and was unable to find them as well. But this really raises an issue with these, I don't want to say it's going to get worse, but it's definitely something that I think companies need to think about when they're building IoT devices, IoT platforms, that their devices, while useful to find lost dogs or whatever, can also be used to find people that don't necessarily want to be found. A lot of anti-stalking and domestic violence organizations are working and are collaborating with big organizations to help bring awareness to these product people to help them understand that, these things are super easy to, hide either on a purse in a club or in a wheel well to somebody's car. The one reason I wanted April and Alyssa on was April put the tweet out, and Alyssa, of course, replied to it. And Apple has said the AirTag is also designed with a set of proactive features that discourage unwanted tracking. And industry first, Bluetooth signal identifiers transmitted by the AirTag rotate frequently to prevent unwanted location tracking. Not very helpful. They should be traceable. And that was a tweet from April on November 19th, 2021. There's a link in the show notes to all of these tweets in the tweet thread. At the time, there was not a way for Android devices to find AirTags. There has now since been at least a couple of applications, one called AirGuard, which I put a link in our show notes to that one, made by a university in Germany. I don't own an AirTag, but I did download it and try using it. I did not find an AirTag in my vicinity when I used it, so I guess I'm okay. But so from a privacy point of view, and the one reason I wanted to have April and Alyssa on was because let's see how I say this. The idea of being stalked or tracked with an IoT device is not what I would consider in my threat model. And it probably should be, but I don't have that in my threat model. I have not really thought about it. And so April, you made the original tweet. What was your thoughts when this video came out?
Well, it was one of the first. I don't watch a lot of TikTok. Let's put that out there.
TikTok.
I only saw it via something else, or somebody else or something. So, I'm watching it, and this poor girl is just falling apart, and she can't find it. She can't find it, and it's like in this tiny little place, like you never would have ever suspected something could fit there. Like there are so many other places it could have been that she would have never found it, and yet it was just in this like piece of her bumper that kind of came off. And so 3 out of the last 4 talks that I've done at conferences have been about anti-stalking and operational security and personal security, because I have been the victim of those things, and it is in my threat model, very much so.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of people, but of course, everybody's threat model is different. I'm probably more paranoid than I should be in certain areas, and probably not enough in others. Not probably, definitely. We always go back to that saying that technology is neither good nor evil. And I think that definitely applies here. The technology itself is not good nor evil. And I've had GPS trackers for years during travel. I mean, years and years. I think that the main difference here is that Apple is popularizing something that was previously limited, generally. So I had this one from Toomey, the luggage, people who make the luggage. So I had one of those, and it was 3G, I want to say. It was either 2G or 3G, and it worked all over the world. It had a super long battery life, but like it wasn't part of a network. It wasn't even to the tile level of network things. It was just like that device and me, basically. And I'm sure it wasn't as secure as it could have been, but it was a different kind of, it was a different way that we were connected. It was more of a one-on-one. It was like a point-to-point. It felt like. It wasn't like I'm part of a network of a billion of these things. And it was fairly big. I mean, it was the size of like, a small piece of cheese, like a that you buy in the grocery store, like a slab of cheese. It was sizable. You couldn't really slip it into somebody's purse as they're walking by or something like that. I mean, like if you're a burglar, like even if you're not a stalker, I mean, there's so many malicious things that you could do with trackers. They've existed for a long time. This makes it easier to track remotely, I think, is probably the biggest difference.
Okay. All right. Alyssa, you had actually replied to the tweet saying, imagine if this was an Android user, Apple really needs to be ashamed of this tech. At the time, there was no way that Android users, if this person had been an Android user on TikTok, they would have gone home. There wouldn't have even been knowing, and whoever the asshole was that put this in the person's car would have potentially known where this person lived. And it's really creepy OSINT that Yeah, it should be punishable by law, but I don't know if the person actually got away with it. What was your thinking when you saw the video on this?
Well, it's like you said. I mean, and April said it. Tech itself inherently isn't good or bad. And to me, this is another case where we came up with something really cool, really useful, super awesome. Apple latched onto it after seeing others do it, and they created their own. And we all know the Apple ecosystem is what it is, good and bad. It's huge. Right. And that's one of the challenges to me with it was you look at how they built their network, and people compare it to like Tile, and I forget what the other one is that's out there. There's a few of them. But the difference is Apple has access to this massive network. They brag about it, right? I mean, it's part of their bragging marketing on this thing is, we've got billions of devices. Well, what did they do with those billions of devices? By default, they opted every single one of them into this network. And it's only if you go into your settings and turn it off that it disables that. And oh, by the way, when you disable that setting, which is the offline finding, by the way, that shuts off other stuff that's actually kind of useful too. So, there's already that issue. So what Apple did was, it wasn't new tech. Like I said, I mean, Apple, I think we're past the days that Apple creates a lot of like brand new stuff that no one's seen before. But they made it accessible and they made it tiny, right? I mean, as April said, this isn't like going to Amazon and buying a GPS tracker that's like the size of a block of cheese, as you said. And that's probably like the perfect description for the size of those things. This is this tiny little, coin-sized thing that I can hide anywhere, and it's completely accessible because you can buy these things wherever. It's, and it's also kind of like that, just sort of, it becomes like an opportunity just in the moment. Like, I could have these things on my keys, and I see some woman at a bar that I want to find out where she lives because she wouldn't give me her phone number. I can pull the thing off of my keys and go out and, and walk by her and slip it in her purse. She never knows it's there. And so, I mean, that's where this, to me, this thing comes up. And yeah, I mean, from a threat model perspective, it should be in everybody's threat model, but let's be honest. Statistics are shown for women, this is in particular a problematic piece. And it's not to say that men and, and non-binary folks aren't going to deal with it too, but traditionally, this is something that women experience far more than anyone else. And so, we're sensitive to it. But what really frustrated me the most with the whole thing that you kind of talked about here was the fact that after Apple started getting the pushback on this thing, they were getting notified by different researchers of different problems, they started fixing them, but they only fixed them within their ecosystem. And that's the thing that really bothers me with this, because like I said, this, okay, so what happens if that had been an Android user? And you mentioned that, like, okay, would this person have still gotten their location? And they would have never even known about it. You mentioned that in this case, she was able to drive somewhere else. She went to a friend's house, which is still a little scary, but, if she had an Android device, she wouldn't have even known it. And if her neighbor had an iOS device that detected it and reported its location, same problem. And even now, Apple released this Tracker Detect, which is their version of the Android app. They released these things, these AirTags, back in April. They made tons of updates to them in June, and that's when they promised us an app. The app came in mid-December, and it's still not helpful because their app, the only way the Android app works is that you have to actively start the app and then press a button and have it search for AirTags.
Right.
So if you're driving, so what are you going to do? Every night now when you leave a bar, if you're an Android user, you have to go fire up your phone, turn on the AirTag finder, and have it run the whole drive home, and then, and then keep it on for hours because, by the way, it will only detect them if they go into lost mode. And, I mean, there's so much wrong with it, and it's just frustrating because, here again, and honestly, I shouldn't say here again, because I think this is the first time I've seen it go this far, where something that a maker has created has this level of danger to people who are outside their ecosystem. right? I mean, this is, and it's unfortunate that that's the case. And so that was my biggest concern, is just like, okay, you guys, you're completely ignoring. Great. So you've protected your users. You put all these cool detections in there. What about the, other, 58% of the world that's on Android?
Right. Yeah. The other thing is, how, unless you know what you're being stalked with, how do you know it's an AirTag? Like April said, what if it was a tile? Or I think this week at CES, even though it was virtual, Amazon announced something called Fetch, which is going to be a dongle that you put on your dog's collar that will track where your dog goes if it gets lost. I did not realize that dogs being lost was an endemic problem here in the United States, but we've created a customized little thing about the size of a piece of cheese. There's a link in our show notes at the bottom here where they announced it this week. They say it's a compact, lightweight device that will clip to your dog's collar and ensure they're safe. If your dog wanders outside the perimeter you've set using the Ring app, Fetch will let you know. In the future, expanding the Sidewalk network, which is another thing I'd like to talk to, because InfoSec Twitter kind of blew up when all that happened. We'll provide customers with even more capabilities like real-time location information, helping you quickly reunite with your lost pet. Now, real-time location information for your dog. Great. I know it's 500 feet down the road because Sidewalk has various things that allow mesh networking in municipal Wi-Fi or using Bluetooth or 900 megahertz. So this is great. I can find my dog, right? But it's a little device, which could also be put on somebody's car or something, which would then give real-time location. So for solving the dog loss problem, we also now have a tracking problem. But if you've read the Sidewalk white paper, they're trying to not make it about being able to be tracked. So how do you have that fine line between, helping you find your lost keys, but also helping you not find the person that you're stalking? How do you find that fine line?
Yeah, chalk this one up to today's problems or yesterday's solutions, right? I'd like to discuss attribution in this case. I mean, okay, doesn't Apple know who is the owner of that device or who has actually tried to log in and track that device? I mean, the device has a unique number, some unifier to it. Law enforcement could take that, go to Apple and say, okay, I need the owner of this device. I need to know who accessed online this tracker, right? It could only be one person unless it was stolen. And even if it were stolen, why would they place the device if they weren't going to use it?
Sure. So a couple things, because that's come up too, and it's a fair point, right? I mean, at each one of these trackers, it has to be registered to you so you can use the Find My app in order to locate it. Couple thoughts though. It takes 8 hours before that thing starts beeping to let somebody know. Anywhere between 8 and 24 hours. That's a long time where a person may not be aware it's there. And I'm thinking now, more an Android user, but even potentially an iOS user, if they didn't see the alert on their phone or whatever else. No guarantee they're going to hear it. No guarantee, as April mentioned, that they're going to be able to dig it out of some weird location in their car and actually find this thing. So, in that amount of time, what other bad things have happened? Great, good. I can find out who it was that raped me after I got raped. I still got raped, so that's problematic. The other challenge here is, there is a certain level of plausible deniability. Oh, it ended up in her purse. How did it end up in her purse? Well, you can't prove that I put it there on purpose. I was talking to her. Maybe it fell off my key ring or something. Who knows? I mean, it's a legitimate thing. Would you expect that it would be a deterrent? You would expect so, but we keep seeing stories about it. NBC just released another story about it not more than a couple weeks ago. So clearly that deterrent isn't doing enough. And so, I think it's And I've heard I mean, we could get into all the various scenarios where that's not even going to be helpful either. I saw somebody talking about their ex had them and their ex was using it to track them and, things like that, where it'd be really easy to claim, well, I obviously left that one behind or whatever, I mean, so there's, you could argue the hypotheticals there, I think. It's a legitimate thing, and I think maybe that's at least somewhat of a deterrent. I think fewer people would be apt to do it, but clearly from the stories we're hearing, it's not enough of a deterrent to keep people from using this.
Yeah.
I also think that you can end up with people that, I mean, how hard is it to get a fake Apple account? You can get a PO box, you can, or you can have something sent to a nearby, neighbor who's out of town, like emails, phone numbers. It's not that hard to set up and proxy it through VPNs, go around the world, Tor, whatever you need to do. And, non-repudiation doesn't exist anymore.
Right. So the other thing is, April, you had mentioned this thing that runs over 3G. How expensive was that?
It was $250 for the device, and it was like $99 a year.
Ooh, okay. So I don't have an AirTag, but what I understand is they're not $250 plus $99 a year. They're much cheaper, which is probably one of the reasons why people are using them to stock, using them in this manner. My whole thing was, if it is lost, what happens? I mean, it makes a noise, but these things are really tiny. How loud a noise can that be? If you stuck it on somebody's car, would they be able to hear that noise happening? The other thing is, if it's lost and it makes that noise and you see it on the ground and you pick it up and you're like, oh, this little AirTag is gone. For me, I don't know if I'm a D-bag or whatever, but I wouldn't actually do what is necessary to give it back to the person. I mean, I don't know what it would be attached to that would, if there's car keys, I guess I could turn it into the lost and found. But, if I found it on my car, the first thing I would do is, add, one ingredient. I would just add a hammer and, bash shit out of it or see how well it microwaves or bury it. I wouldn't be trying to give it back necessarily to whoever owned it if I found it in a place. But at what point does this technology actually harm more than it does good? I mean, when we had Litmoos on, some of the statistics she gave me about 17 million people are on average a victim of stalking every year. So when these things are developed, are these things not considered part of the threat model? I don't know. It just seems like some of these things are not even thought of as, this can be used in a bad way. It just seems like they only think about the ways that it can be used positively. And again, I'm going back to finding lost keys or, lost luggage or dogs or, whatever. Is it just natural for us not to threat model and think of the bad things?
But we know that they threat modeled and thought of bad things because they talked about the rotating keys. We know they considered, or the rotating.
The AirTags.
Yeah. So we know that they thought about it, about the possibility of them being used as stock. Maybe they just didn't play it out, or maybe they decided that they would try to build in other safeguards. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about the ecosystem there, so I'm a little lost on that.
And that's honestly, that's to me a little frustrating too, that Apple is pretty quiet and pretty protective of what goes on behind their closed doors. I mean, if you've ever seen the infamous Apple employment agreement, it's it's pretty brutal. But I mean, and to that end, and this is one of the things I guess I would really like to see. So you talk about this scenario where you find a set of keys out on the, maybe left in the bar, out on the street, laying in the sidewalk somewhere, whatever, and they have an AirTag tracker on them, and you pick them up, and what do? Maybe, you take them home with you, and you call the, police to say, hey, I found this thing, or whatever, but you just took it home with you. So, I mean, have AirTags now become the new USB drop? And so
Yeah.
what is Apple doing to educate people on that threat? Well, of course they're not doing anything, and nobody's going to, because that would be admitting that there's a risk to using your product, and nobody wants that in their marketing material. Nobody wants that out on the web,
Right.
and so it's not just Apple. I'm not picking on them here. It's, you know, but that's what has to happen, and we don't see that enough in tech. And so I'm talking bigger now. I'm not just talking AirTags anymore. I'm talking IoT in general, because that's kind of where you started this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do enough when we create these things to communicate to consumers, here's potential risks of using this device, because we don't want to, because it would be bad marketing, it wouldn't help us. And yet that's how I think we get better at this, is users have to understand what the risks and threats of these things are, so that they can, make an intelligent decision on their own. And that's the issue. So if you had, say, IoT company X does a threat model, and they figure this stuff out, and they talk about the threats, and then they communicate that out. Well, now you save millions of people having to do their own threat modeling. They can just decide, how does that threat model fit mine, and is it worth buying this thing? And now you start to see some of that. Does it solve all the issues? No, it wouldn't stop somebody else from buying an AirTag and dropping it on you. But that's where where do we start to draw the line of responsible product development? And this is an age-old argument that we've been talking about as long as I've been in tech. So I can't say that I have a magical answer to that, and I don't think there is one answer, but that's where I think this comes back to.
Nice. Yeah. So, Mr. Betcher, do you have an iPhone, or are you an Android person?
Android.
Okay. So another question that kind of builds upon this is, should security people be using the technology to understand? Okay. So so you have an iPhone. Did that work for you when you did a scan of your neighborhood? Did you try it when you first heard about this, April? You're muted, by the way. You're muted.
I've never done a scan. I just went to get one though to see how loud it was, and you can basically mute it by putting your hands over it or putting it under a pillow or something. It is not very loud.
Well, I wondered about tamper features. Like, can you pop it open and disable the noise making thing inside, and it can still continue to run? Does the app go, hey, this has been tampered with, it won't make a noise? Or does it give you any kind of information if you were to scan it to say, hey, this person lives at this address? Because like Alyssa said, if you found the keys and took them home, if you were able to scan that tag and say, oh, this, Bob Mitchell lives at 123 Red Street, now you've got his house keys and you know where he lives.
So
go ahead.
I will jump in and say, thankfully, that does not happen, right?
Oh, good.
You cannot, if you find an AirTag, you don't get the information on the person that's the owner of it. Thankfully, that you have to go through Apple. But no, the challenge, like I said, is like the AirTag becomes like the new USB drop. I could intentionally, quote unquote, lose my AirTag, hoping somebody else picks it up, and now whatever weird thing I want to do with that information, I potentially could. Be really random. I don't know why somebody would want to do that. Like just randomly find somebody to attack that way. I don't know, but those are things to be considered too.
Right.
And at the price point of a rubber ducky, for $25, you can track somebody for a year, basically.
So those last a year, the AirTags last a year?
In theory, yeah. Although I bought a couple of 4-packs, and one of them died after like a week. It was maybe the battery, I don't know. So they just use the little CR2032 there.
Oh, okay. I thought they were rechargeable or something. I didn't. Okay. All right.
No,
it's
the watch battery.
Right. So, that the tinker or the person with, equipment who had a diligent method, seems like they could crack those open and maybe replace the battery or find ways to continue using it in that respect. I'm watching her, playing with it. So
there's no access. It's just a little white thing with electronics on the inside, and then
okay. So you can replace the watch battery.
Yeah,
okay.
You can put the watch battery in, and then it closes back up.
Right on.
It's really simple.
Okay.
It makes it keep noise.
Oh, it makes it look, yeah. The fact you can
it.
Yeah, the fact you can drown that out with your hand, wow. Okay. Let me see. So, let's see. Well, I put some stuff down here. I said, we're looking at, building these, privacy and stalking and tracking and surveillance kind of issues. There's that happy medium that we have to find. For companies that, are trying to build these things and say they don't want to track, yet, they're building these things. There must be some information that they're wanting out of that. I mean, what is gained by selling AirTags? There's no net gain to the company by other than, moving these things that die. I'm just trying to figure out, what do they do with that information? Do they, I'm wondering if sales and marketing people have access to that information by GPS or, what people actually do with that stuff. Let me see. Buzzers, size issues, battery life. Sorry, I'm just thinking.
So there's a lot of interesting things going on right now, especially even further with COVID. But even before that, there have been a lot of different, I'll say AI companies that are coming up with ways to count people in rooms, to count people in buildings, to determine the distribution of people in buildings, how people move, the flow, what areas they use, what areas they don't use, that kind of thing. Now in COVID, it's being used to make sure that there aren't too many people in a building or in a room or something like that. But the technology behind it is actually pretty fascinating, especially from a privacy perspective, because of what the cameras are capturing. They're not supposed to be identifiable, and they basically kind of blur everything out. And there's some other really cool technologies where there'll be a camera aimed at a whiteboard, and as you're writing on the whiteboard, it will actually see through you and show the whiteboard because there's multiple cameras. So there's some really interesting stuff going on with all of this. But I wonder if it has something to do with capacity planning or even Google, even Apple Maps improving, walking times and things like that. I don't know.
I mean, I could see a lot of potential uses, but I also wonder, I mean, I don't know that you get much more out of it than what you would already get from all of the location services on the phone, right? I mean, I'm thinking about things like retail, where you get targeted alerts on your phone when you walk into the, an Aldo store or something like that, right? Retail's been doing that type of thing now for a number of years. I don't know. And this is why you have to pay for the AirTags. It's why they're not free, right? Because we all know if it's free, you're the product. Right? I mean, that's a pretty solid business model that we've all gotten used to. Yep. So I don't know. I don't know what Apple would gain from that, or any of the other, Samsung and whatnot. I don't know what they would gain from selling these trackers that isn't data they wouldn't already have. But it is an interesting question, and it actually scares me a little, because now I'm like waiting for that other shoe to drop.
Okay, that was it for this week. You can find all of us on Twitter. InfoSyster, INFOSYSTIR for Miss Berlin. Betcherpwned, BOETTCHERPWNED. You can find me at Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE, and the podcast is at BrakeSec. And you can join us on our Slack by sending us a DM to BrakeSec or bds.podcast@gmail.com. Thank you to all of our supporters on Patreon. It's just a little tip jar we use to make sure that we can keep things going, like hosting fees, domain registration, Zoom fees, etc. So we do appreciate all of our supporters for that. So, all right, that was it. Have a great week. Be kind to one another. Take care of yourself, because as we always say, you're the only you have. And we'll talk to you again soon.